Is that close enough, Dean, this time? Okay. Michael Norton. Michael. Okay. Thank y'all. Thank y'all for what you do. We also have some pages. And if you would stand when I call your name and tell us who your sponsor is and where you're from. Cage Jackson.
My name is Cage Jackson. I'm from North Carolina.
Okay. Thank you. Glad to have you with us. We have Sarah N.T. Okay, she's from Morrisville, and Senator Berger's her sponsor. We have Avery Pitchard. Okay, and then we have, is it Zoe Zhang? Okay, well, thank y'all all for being here with us, and we hope you learned something this week. It's been a pretty busy week, I would imagine, to be a good time to be a page with us. For the public, if you wanted to speak, we are going, if time allows, we're going to allow public comment for just a moment or two. I think some have signed up, but you will be limited. Terry, what did we decide on the time? 2 minutes? 3 minutes? Okay. Depending on how much time we have, you got somewhere between 1.5 minutes and 1 I'd say that's enough, which is about probably be 2 to 3 minutes. But we only have one, just two, is that correct? Okay, we just have two, so okay, I'll be gracious with our time if time allows. So we have one bill before us today, House Bill 823, which is a PCS. Senator Lee will be presenting. Before he gets here or while he's coming, this is a PCS. Do I have a motion? We hear the PCS. Have a motion, Senator Sanderson, second by Senator Krovic. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, let it know by saying aye. Aye. Thank you. The motion is passed and carried. Senator Lee, you have the podium.
Thank you, Senator Jackson. Today's PCS is from the Choose Your School, Choose Your Future, and it was the primary sponsor was Representative Cotham. There were other sponsors from the House. Today's bill is really just kind of technical. It's just modifying some of the dollars in the appropriations, which is why we're in appropriations, as opposed to looking at the policy. But what I do want to talk about briefly is the massive outpouring of folks who applied not just for the Opportunity Scholarship, but for the PISA Plus. The PISA Plus is something that started with the ESAs and something I sponsored back in, I think it was 2015 or 16, has been combined with the disability grant, and now it's a program that's pretty amazing, and I'm glad to see so many families taking advantage of it. So each of the Opportunity Scholarships and the PISA Plus are a little different from an appropriations perspective. The Opportunity Scholarship is forward funded. The PISA Plus is not, so it's just a little different in how it works and how you see it in the bill. So what you'll see in the bill for the Opportunity Scholarships is $248 million in non-recurring funds to catch up to clear the wait list for this year, and then you'll see $215 million approximately that goes to the Opportunity Scholarships as part of the forward funding for future years. Whereas what you're going to see in the PISA Plus is really just a catch up to clear the wait list of $24.7 million. There was criticism of the Opportunity Scholarship Program in years past because the dollars weren't fully expended. And there are lots of reasons for that. Number one, it was really hard to get the message out to families that they had the opportunity to send their child to the school of their choice, irrespective of income, so long as they could hit that Opportunity Scholarship. So that marketing was, we even put money behind the marketing to let families know. This year was a little different. And I have to thank the governor. The governor went around the state telling everybody about Opportunity Scholarships. I mean everybody. So that people came to me on the street that I'd never met before and said, I just heard the governor. Is that true? And I said, well, it depends on which part you're talking about. The part about Opportunity Scholarships being available is very true. And so you saw in the first week, or the first day that is, more applications were received than the entire priority application period in 2023. I mean, it was really amazing. So now we've got, over 55,000 families that are really kind of on pins and needles wanting to know, is their child going to be able to go to the school of their choice come the fall? And so that's really kind of what this bill does. I kind of jokingly say it's technical, but it really is. I mean, we're really just clearing the wait list for these two policy programs, one that was expanded last year, and the PISA Plus, for those of you who've been kind of following that, was kind of collapsed into one program. It used to be multiple different programs. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Any questions for Senator Lee? Senator Marcus.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Interesting to hear the urgency with which you want to clear this wait list. I have a lot of problems with this bill, and one of them is your urgency to help the very wealthiest families help pay the tuition for their children to go to private schools with taxpayer money, when we know that the majority of those wealthiest families are already sending their children to those private schools with their own money that they can afford. And this is just a handout to them. And I want to make sure you're aware of the statistics. I sought this information from staff this morning as soon as I heard that we were going to put all this additional millions of dollars into this program. There are, of this wait list, as you call it, that you're so eager to clear, over 70% of the people on that wait list earn more than $115,000 a year for their family of four, and 23% of them are over, rounding up, $260,000 a year is their family income for a family of four. $260,000 a year. That's 23% of the people. And again, 70% of the people you're rushing to help earn more than $115,000. So my question is, why is this your urgent priority, to provide welfare for the wealthiest families who are, in most cases, already affording to send their children to their private school, the school of their choice, as you call it, when we have so many other unmet needs, particularly related to education? Can you justify this welfare for the wealthiest families in some way that makes some sense to the taxpayers of North Carolina?
Senator Lee.
So I'll address the income levels, even though we did that last year. I don't know that I would call a family whose two parents are working, making around $55,000 a year, a wealthy family. I understand
you're
that
changing
you
the
think,
numbers. That's not. I didn't say 55. I said 115,000 plus.
So that's a family.
70% of the people on your wait.
Let's
Senator
take
Marcus.
this through
All
the
right.
chair.
Senator Marcus, I'm assuming that there's a mom and a dad, or two parents, and those two parents earn $115,000 divided by two. So each of those parents are working. To receive 90% of how much we send to schools for those parents, I don't think is giving money to the wealthy, number one. And only 2,300 of the new families received a scholarship, not the rest of them. Number two, my wife and I have four children. And you've heard me say this before. And we've had them in, private school, public school, year-round public school, charter school, residential school, you name it. We've tried everything except for homeschooling, because all of our kids are dramatically different. And we were lucky enough to be able to afford to do that. A family where two breadwinners in the family are making $115,000 divided by two is not going to have that opportunity. Or a single mom with three kids. Or if you want to take any number that you want on the income scale. They're just not going to be able to afford to do that. They have the right to be able to do that. We as a state should do that. And that doesn't include the local funds. I'm not sure if anyone's read my op-ed. It's a plug for it. I know that part of today is not going to have anything to do with this policy. It's going to have to do with how much we fund education in North Carolina as a state. But the urgency of all this is really because these families have to make decisions. And so I'm sure a lot of you in this room have had folks call you. If you're in Wake County, you've probably had people calling you. If you're in Mecklenburg, because y'all have the highest numbers of anyone else right now. It used to be Cumberland. So, I mean, that's the reason we need to do this right now. We may tweak other things from a policy perspective later, but we need to clear the wait list so these families have some certainty on where their kids are going to go to school.
Follow up?
Thank you, Senator Lee. Follow up, Senator
Please,
Marcus.
Mr. Chair.
Absolutely.
Thank you. As I said earlier, I believe it's pretty obvious based on these income level, if you're earning $260,000 plus, which again that's the tier 4, that's the top tier of the wealthiest families in North Carolina. 23% of the people on this wait list that your bill is eager to help, they're already paying their private school tuition and can afford it quite well. So I think it's disingenuous to say that they are somehow waiting on this bill to save them in order to decide if their kids can continue to go to Greensboro Day or Providence Day or all the the fanciest private schools that money can buy. Those kids are already there. I think we all know that. I also want to make sure we point out for the record that there are 0 unfunded awards, 0 people on the wait list in Tier 1, the families that earn up to and including $57,000 plus. So those are the families that this Opportunity Scholarship Program, as you like to call it, that were meant to benefit from this, to somehow bring them up to a level that the wealthiest families are already at. Those have been fully funded. We don't need this bill to do that. And I'm glad you mentioned some of the other priorities, because I'd like to just get on the record some of the other things that this money could buy. If we don't pass this bill, if we just froze where these voucher spending already exists and kept it there and rejected this PCS today, we would have about $200 million extra dollars. And I think that we should spend that money on other priorities, not, again, welfare for the wealthiest families at taxpayer expense, but $197 million would cover North Carolina pre-K, would clear that wait list. $200 million would provide child care subsidy grants so families can go to work and know their kids are safe. $128.5 million would be subsidies for working families in low wealth and rural counties to help pay for child care. Or we could spend it on an additional 3.4% raise for public school teachers. Those are some of the priorities that are falling second and maybe we'll never get to in favor of this bill, this welfare for the wealthiest families, to help them pay the tuition bill that they're already able to afford to pay to send their kids to private school. I think it's a huge mistake.
Thank you, Senator Marcus. Senator Heiss, Chairman Heiss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few comments. I will first say all of the policies that fully cleared the wait list and the backlog, we've already passed in the budget. When we passed the budget was balanced. We had funded all of these tiers, all of these positions. We just did not anticipate basically the interest in the program and how many more people would apply for it than we had anticipated. This is nothing more than funding the policy we have already passed. We did not intend for there to be a wait list under any income level, and that's what we all voted on last session. I'm a little perplexed by the fact that we are now, or at least certain people are now calling paying for a child's education welfare. I mean, I guess if you paid for it for a wealthy person, you'll call it welfare. But to identify this as welfare when no one is debating that exactly what this is doing is paying for the education of a child, maybe I misunderstood the debates we've had about using the term welfare up to this point. But we're in North Carolina, and we have a constitutional right to a free education. Now, I mean, maybe if you want to go amend the Constitution and say that rights only applies to poor people, or that if you make a certain amount of money, you no longer have a right to an education free, you're right to put that bill forward and say what you really mean. But if a public school is not working for a family, we're trying to say if you're wealthy enough, that's your job to go find something else. No, the right of providing the education for a child is the state's responsibility, and we are using private centers to do that. I don't know what you'd call it if we spent this money on early childhood or something else. I guess that's not falling into the new definition of welfare. But just to make those comments and put it out there, this is merely treating everyone the same in the state. We are putting funds in available. You go to my district, you go to my home county, we're not talking about elite private schools. They don't exist. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a school a church runs where families are making the decision to find a place that fits the education of their child better. And that's the only option. It doesn't matter what income level you're at. And so I'd ask the entire committee to support this and fulfill what we've already promised to these families.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Ice. Chairman Lee. Oh, okay, Senator Robinson.
Oh, you're trying to ignore me, Senator?
No, ma'am, I'm not. I would never ignore
You
you.
just spoke to me coming in. Listen here. So just a couple of things.
Wait a minute, though. I got to stop. Is that possible for me to ignore you?
No.
You always track me down. Right? Okay, go ahead.
You cannot. You've learned that over 14 years. You can't. But just to comment a couple of things on this. When we talk about providing the same opportunities, Senator Heiss, for everybody, I think we need to go back to Leandro. And you know my history with Leandro. I was on the Closing the Achievement Gap Commission that said that North Carolina is not providing a fair and equitable education for everybody. And so this General Assembly has failed every time to fully fund Leandro to provide the social workers, the nurses, the salary for the teachers, the additional teacher assistants, et cetera, for all children. And that's taxpayer money. We're talking about taxpayer money for private schools. And yeah, I have nothing against. One of my grandchildren went to private schools too. We paid, or their parents paid. So that's all right. You got the right to do it. But the priority ought to be to the children who can't. One representative who was a Republican in Texas, and you may have read it, said that vouchers are welfare for the wealthy. He wasn't a Democrat. He was a Republican. And he was saying that what we ought to be doing is making sure that the children who can least afford education be given the resources to have that kind of education. We could fund 100,000 teachers in North Carolina with 3.4% increase to keep them in the classroom. They're leaving by leaps and bounds because they do not make enough to take care of their families. So this money could be used for teaching assistants, could be used for social workers, could be used for nurses, and they are taxpayer-funded dollars that should be going into funding Leandro so we bring all of the schools up. We're talking about a few children where parents want to send them to private schools because they feel that public schools are failing. Well, the public schools are failing, we are failing them because we are not putting the resources in it, and this is another indication of that.
Thank you, Senator Robinson. Senator Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, let's try it again. I guess this is a question for Senator Lee. The top of page 2, it says that we're going to appropriate from the general fund of the revenue amounts, and I'm reading along, and I see where's your intent for 24-25 to appropriate $191 million. But then 25-26, as I read this language, it goes from $191 million to $625 million, a more than threefold increase. And then from there, over the next 8 years, goes up to $825 million appropriation for this. Can you help me in a short session when, based on conversation before this bill was filed, what I thought your intent was to take care of the backlog and the waiting list, and maybe to set the appropriation for the next fiscal year. But this is committing the state to significant amounts of money, up to $825 million over the next 8 years. Am I reading that right? Is that the intent for this to go to $625 million in the next fiscal year, and then on upwards over $800 million a year?
Chairman Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if you look at line 12 of the 191,000 and you add the catch-up appropriation of the 248, that brings you up to the 439, and that's to catch up to clear the wait list, and then we forward fund the appropriation on opportunity scholarships, again, different than the PISA Plus. So the forward funding amount is $215,460. And I guess I would note that even with the appropriation this year, we're still looking at an appropriation for an opportunity scholarships at about 3% of the overall education budget and just under 4.5% of the K-12 budget. And so as the budgets for education, as you know, increase in the billions in each biennium, that will continue to increase. And I suspect, assuming the uptake remains relatively constant, that as a percentage of the overall budget, absent something like the governor doing another tour advertising, we won't see another big massive influx in the very beginning. So as a percentage of the overall education budget, it is incredibly small.
Other questions, comments? Your mic's on, Senator Gailey. Would you like to speak?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Senator Gailey.
Thank you, sir. Well, first I had a question for staff.
Sure.
If maybe somebody from fiscal research could tell us, for Senator Marcus was talking about the tier levels for a family of 4. I was wondering if staff could tell us what the scholarship amount would be for a family of 4 for the 4 different levels. I believe tier 1 is around $7,000.
I'm going to direct that to Stephen Bailey. Stephen, if you would answer that question, if you can, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Gailey. To your question, so there are 4 tiers for the Opportunity Scholarship Program. Tier 1, which is set at 100% of the reduced price lunch, or $57,000 around for a family of 4. That award amount is $7,468. Then Tier 2, the award value is $6,722. Tier 3, the award value is $4,480. And then finally, Tier 4, the award value is $3,360. And at no point can the award value exceed the tuition and fees at a school. So some families may ultimately receive a lower amount than that.
Thank you, Stephen. Follow up, Senator Gailey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I can just comment on the bill, that'd be okay.
Sure, absolutely.
I think that it really disturbs me to hear people talk about welfare in a pejorative term. The concept of welfare, I think we understand today to be assistance to low-income people who have a gap in their ability to provide basic necessities for their family. Whether that is food or medicine through Medicaid or housing assistance or things like that. So to use the term welfare as sort of an attack term, I think is really insulting to the people who actually need public assistance to cover those gaps in their lives when they're having times of trouble. If we're going to talk about high-income earners, they are the taxpayers. And this is not quote-unquote welfare if it's actually their own money. They're the ones who pay the taxes. And if you have a high-income earner of a family with over $260,000 in income, and they're receiving back an opportunity scholarship around $3,360, I would submit that that is well below the amount of taxes that they are still paying into the state of North Carolina and into the public school system. And not to mention the property taxes that they're paying to the county, and therefore funding the capital needs and other needs of the public school system. This is a fraction of what the family is actually subsidizing the public school system, which we all benefit as a common good, and we all benefit from a strong and healthy K-12 system. But ultimately, the state controls the curriculum. And the state controls the attendance zones. And families want a measure of control over their own child's education. And we saw with some of the education initiatives of last year where we had so much outpouring of resistance to some of the things that the state, through local school systems, has been deciding to do through curriculum with some fringe ideas with, gender identity. Families are resistant to that for their own children, and they are seeking alternatives. And so I think it's really interesting on one side for those who staunchly support traditional K-12 to any extreme of what traditional K-12 may look like, also resist staunchly an opportunity for a family to access their own tax dollars to be able to provide a different education for their child. And finally, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to mention that in the income range of $115,000 to $260,000, that's the middle class. That is 100% the middle class in the United States of America. That is 2 county employees married to each other. Somebody who works for the health department being married to somebody who works for the Parks and Rec department. That can be a nurse married to a police officer. These are hardworking American families who are desperate for a better alternative education to their child, or a better fit for their child versus what they see in their school attendance zone. And if we can help them find that fit for their child, then I think that by doing that, we are fulfilling our constitutional duty to provide a sound basic public education.
Thank you, Senator Gailey. Senator Robinson, you have...
Yes, just one
Sure.
one question, since we're talking about
Absolutely.
making sure everything's equitable and parents having the right. Senator Lee, can you tell me what are the accountability standards for schools receiving the vouchers, and how do they compare with our standards for our public education system?
Senator Lee, you would like to address that?
I can
maybe
run. I
staff.
can run down the list for you. They've got to be officially operating as a non-public school, as determined by the Division of Non-Public Education. They've got to provide SCAA with the tuition and fees that are charged, and make sure that they can comply with the program, not charging more than, or that the grant is not more than tuition. They have to do background checks, provide written explanations to parents. They have to administer nationally normed tests every single year. This most recent version requires them to administer the ACT for all 11th graders. And there's a laundry list of other reporting requirements. I'd be happy to
Okay,
discuss any of that with you.
can I clarify
Follow
that,
up?
Senator Jackson, please?
Okay, yeah, clarify.
In terms of the standards by which we are measuring public schools right now, the performance standards in terms of grading, teachers in terms of what their certification or education has to be, those metrics are what I'm interested in. How do they compare? And then, where we are doing tests at several levels in terms of the children being able to ascend to the next one, that's what I want to know.
Senator Robinson,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman. So in this last, I'm going to address that, and then I'm going to address kind of the root of the question. In the last, when we passed this in the budget last year, we had a provision in there that asked DPI to determine a nationally normed test that we could have administered to all Opportunity Scholarship schools and also the traditional public schools and charters, so that we could take that aggregate data and see how we were doing as a state. But I will tell you that I'm a parent, and a lot of the people in here are parents. And when our kids are going to school, we decide how well that school's doing. And if we don't like how that school's doing, what I've done in the past is I've moved my child because I have the means to do that. Some parents don't. And it really frustrates me that people think that people who have less money don't have the same attitude or follow-up with their children that I have with my children, or that some of the senators in this room have with their children. So it really, really frustrates me when you think you're smart. Not you, Senator Robinson. But some of the senators that have come up to me and think that they're smarter than a parent is on what their child needs to learn in school. And I've got my youngest child has needed a lot of help in a lot of areas, and the traditional public school, just wasn't there for him. For lots of different reasons. And he would not be where he is today. He would not live independently. There are lots of things he wouldn't be doing unless we had the means to be able to do that. And I'm not saying that this is going to fix all those problems. I'm just saying it's going to help another child like my son attend a school that's going to help him and make a difference in his life.
Thank you, Senator Lee.
No, I think I've had mine too, and I think I made my point.
Okay.
We need to put funds into public schools so parents don't feel that they have to take their kids out of a public school that's convenient to them, where they can provide transportation, they get free and reduced meals, et cetera, and then try to find a way to put them into a private school.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Robinson. Other comments? Senator Marcus?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think staff could probably answer these clarifying questions for me.
Okay.
It's my understanding, tell me if I'm right, that there is no limit on a family's income to be able to qualify for these taxpayer-funded school vouchers, right? You can earn a gazillion dollars and still qualify under Tier 4. Is that correct?
Okay, Senator, hold 1 second, Senator Marcus. Stephen, would you like to tackle that one?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Marcus, at Tier 4, there's no income limit. So once you go above the 450% reduced price lunch, you are put into Tier 4, which again is the $3,360.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen.
And then,
Senator Marcus, you have a follow-up?
yeah, if I could, I just have kind of two more in that vein of clarifying. Is that okay?
Yeah, as long as I can keep you under control. Go ahead.
Is there any limit on the number of children in a family that can qualify for their own voucher? Or can it be however many children you have and apply for, regardless of income, they all get a voucher?
Stephen, would you like to?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Senator Marcus, there's no cap on the number of students you can have, family can have that receives an opportunity scholarship, correct?
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. Senator Marcus?
And then my last question on these vouchers and how they're going to be used. So the private schools that are eligible to take in students and accept these vouchers, it's my understanding that there are several counties in our state that have no such private schools at all. Some have only one in the whole county, or two, as in Mitchell County. I think there's only two. Do you have the data to just have on the record how many counties don't even have a private school? So, and I guess the follow-up question there would be, is it really fair to the taxpayers in those counties whose kids don't have a school to use them to pay for families in other
Senator
counties?
Marcus,
and staff can't answer that part, but that part's for
we don't
the
want to
bill
put Stephen
sponsor.
in that position. So
Right, no, I'll ask Stephen the data part, and
Yes.
then if the bill sponsor or Mr. Chair, whoever wants to answer
Okay.
is that fair question?
go ahead, Stephen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Marcus. So we're trying to calculate the number of counties that don't have an eligible non-public school right now. And by that I mean right now, according to SEAA, there are 632 schools that right now are eligible to receive direct payment for the Opportunity Scholarship Program. Now, there are more private schools in the state than that. So between now and the end of the year, the end of the fiscal year, more schools could get added. So it's possible there's a private school that could decide they want to accept direct payment. But right now,
Between 10 and 15.
seems like it's right around 10 to 15 schools that or counties right now that don't have a eligible non-public school that's noted on SEA's website as of today.
Thank you, Stephen. Now, Senator Marcus, you want to follow up that last part you said?
Yes, so if I could just restate what I think you just said is we're not certain, but it's approximately 10 to 15 counties have 0 schools right now who are eligible to accept vouchers. And I don't think I got an answer on how many have just 1 or 2, but I'm going to assume it's also a significant number. And so then, yes, my question is,
Well, then, hold on, Senator Marcus. Stephen, is that pretty accurate of what you just described? I mean, you're asking for him to pull up stuff that's probably not right on the tip of his tongue, or any of the rest of us in this room. So,
Thank you, Chairman Jackson. If Excel would cooperate, I think we could get an answer on the 1 to 2 schools, but the 10 to 15 range for 0 seems to be about right. And we can certainly follow up with the full range by county if members are interested.
If you would, send that to all the members of this committee, please. Okay, now Senator Marcus. Carry on.
Okay, and then to restate the fairness issue, I see, given that there are so many counties that have none or 1 or 2 in a large county, I'll ask it as a question. Do you see that as fair that the families in those counties are going to pay into a system that other families can use and they can't? And that's regardless of their income. They have to pay their taxes. And their own public school is their option, their only option, and yet they're paying for the wealthiest families to to help pay the private school tuition bill. How is that not only fair, but why is that the priority?
So I appreciate.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. I mean, the idea, Senator Marcus, is you're right. In those counties, children don't have an alternative other than the school that they're relegated to by their zip code. So by increasing the number of opportunity scholarships at all levels, increases demand and hopefully creates markets in those counties that just don't have any other option. So I do think this particular program is like many programs. It's going to help in the long run for those counties by developing and creating that market. The one thing that a lot of us aren't really talking about, Senator Heiss touched on it, is that I'm not going to ask staff a question because I already know the answer, and it drives me nuts when people do that. There's no income limit on how much we spend on students that attend private school, or public school, rather. There's none at all. And y'all can check with Stephen later to make sure that I'm right. But not only is this 4 times less than what we'd be paying for those children to attend a traditional private school, but your counties aren't, again, if you haven't read the op-ed, they pay a percentage of every dollar going to our traditional public schools. They will have the opportunity to use their 24 to 27% of every dollar to continue to direct that to the traditional public school system. We have a traditional public school reinvestment fund. I asked Stephen to run the numbers for me on that. The numbers are significant on those that transfer out of a traditional public school into an opportunity scholarship. The dollars that remain constant within that particular program. So if you take the dollars that the counties have available that they're not spending on those students, the differential between the opportunity scholarship amount and how much the state funds for those in Tier 3 and Tier 4, Tier 2 is 90%, so you're looking at 10%. You're talking about a significant amount of money going into the traditional public school system in addition to what we're already doing in the state of North Carolina. And that has gotten us to be ranked by U.S. News & World Report as number 12, and I think CNBC as number 7. The NEA says we're raising our teacher salaries in the last decade faster than every other state other than 3. Instructional support, every other state raising them faster except for 3 other states. I mean, the data's there. I know that people don't like hearing that we raise salaries every year. They don't seem to understand the impact. I don't always think the NEA gets it right, but even though they might get it wrong, they're even saying that we're in the top 5, top 4 in the country for raising salaries. I'm sorry, I'm getting frustrated. Creating a market for private schools by having more that have the opportunity to go.
Okay, thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Bergen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can tell you what's happening in Harnett County is ever since this first came out, we've been getting a lot of conversations. People have been contacting our church talking about wanting to do things. In Harnett County right now, there's probably a need for about $400 million of school construction. We're a fast-growing county because of our proximity to Wake County. A lot of folks in this room are living in Harnett County. I've had people in my office all day that say we've moved to Harnett County, and we can't keep up with school construction. But this money is going to allow people to make alternative choices quickly for their children. One school I was at just this past week has just added 8 trailers because of the growth. So when churches and other facilities start getting calls specifically because of this money, I think it shows that it is working. And Senator Lee, would you share those numbers from the op-ed? You've mentioned it 3 times, and I want to hear the numbers for what the state does, what the counties do, and what the federal government does for education.
Thank you, Senator Bergen. Senator Lee.
So the national average splits 47% state, 45% local, and 8% Fed. In North Carolina, the average split is 63% state, 24% local, and 13% Fed. That puts us, I think, at number 12 or 13 every single year in how much we spend for state support of education, K-12 education.
Okay, thank you. Senator Woodard.
I just want to respond to Senator Marcus's question because I had looked at some numbers from the State Education Assistance Authority, who I guess tracks this and does the funding. They reported that for the 24-25 school year starting, 100 counties, 16 do not have a school that accepts direct payment. 14 have just one, and then there are 47 counties that have fewer than 5 or fewer to choose from. So I had found those numbers and just thought they might be helpful. And we'll wait for our staff to verify all that, but I did want to share that.
Thank you, Senator Woodard. Senator Ford.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I could say a lot, but I'll say one thing. I have a single mom in my district that has called me, and she's in Tier 2, and she's hoping and praying that we get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We got public comment.
Just one last comment, Mr.
Sure.
Chairman. I know that Senator Marcus and others have had questions about Tier 4. So the lion's share of Tier 4 is in Wake, Meck, Forsyth, Guilford, Cumberland, and Orange. If y'all would want to opt out in your county, come see me after. And if you want to amend this bill, I'll be happy to discuss that with you.
Okay, thanks, Senator Lee. At this time, we have, excuse me, I cut my own self off, which might not have been a bad thing. But we have 2 that would like to speak. So we have Mark Swallow, and I hope I pronounced that correct. And you have 2, I'm going to give him 2 minutes, Terry.
Okay, one of the stated objectives of this
Mr. Swallow, please state your name for the record, please.
Yes, sir. Mark Swallow, taxpayer.
Thank you, sir.
One of the stated objectives of this legislation is to allow free and reduced lunch recipients to receive grants that will allow them to attend a private school of their choice. But there are problems. Number one, North Carolina for this school year, according to Google, there are 1.4 million students with approximately 47% receiving free and reduced lunches. That's 638,000 students targeted for a grant with this bill. For this year, the average price for attending a private school is $10,209. So in order to meet the goals of this legislation, you would need $6.5 billion this year. 2, despite transportation being allowed to be included in the grant, page 2, section B3, page 3, section B4 states no scholarship grant shall exceed tuition or fees. So apparently the expectation is that these students that are working 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 jobs, if both are working 2 jobs, will have to get their students to and from school every school day, even if they must arrive late to work or leave early from work, a situation few employers are going to tolerate. 3, nothing in this bill allows for early drop-off of students nor after-school support for working parents. 4, assumes that there are private schools across the entire state where students need choice, which there aren't. 5, it assumes that these private schools would be willing and able to allow these 638,000 students to join their school, which they won't. So let's be honest, right? This bill isn't really about stated objectives. In fact, these grants will once again benefit the well-connected and the wealthy. The whole objective of this bill is to take money that should be going to public schools and sent to private schools with no oversight. If you really want to help the 2.3 million children, 1.4 million students in this state and fulfill your constitutional responsibilities, you can do the following 3 things. Fully fund public education. This would help every school district and student in North Carolina. The number 1 killer of our children in North Carolina are guns. Reduce that number, remove militarized weapons from our state. And 3, vote no on this outrageous bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swallow. Next up, we have Reverend Susanna Parker Mills, I believe, or Miller. I might have it wrong. But just state your name for the record, please, and welcome.
Thank you.
You're
Good
welcome.
afternoon. I'm the Reverend Suzanne Parker Miller, and I am the Executive Director of Pastors for North Carolina Children. I'm here today to stand in opposition of House Bill 823 to further expand vouchers for unregulated, unaccountable, and discriminatory private schools and ask instead that you fully fund public education. The voucher program dates back to the end of segregation with Brown versus Board of Ed. Segregationists, led by some white churches, wanted to continue to segregate their white children from those children across town or across the tracks. They did not want their white children meeting neighbors who had more melanin in their skin. Thus, segregation academies opened to perpetuate segregation at taxpayer expense. It was wrong of churches then to encourage segregation, and it is wrong today as well. We have the constitutional obligation and a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity today to fully fund the Leandro Plan as a way to ensure that every single one of our children in this state, all 1.5 million of them, have what they need each to flourish. It's the only right and moral thing to do. It's also the legal thing to do, as you all, as legislators, have sworn an oath to uphold the North Carolina Constitution. So I ask you to fully fund the Leandro Plan before ever considering further expansion of vouchers. The beauty and grace of public schools is that they must serve every child who walks in their door, regardless of disability or zip code or family income. Public schools build our communities. Public schools ensure every child receives what they need to flourish, or they can if you do your jobs. When we fund exclusionary private schools at the expense of public schools, we are not living into God's definition of neighbor because we are putting some children above others. If a public school is not good enough for your child or grandchild to attend, then it's past time that we fully fund that public school to make it the best that it can be. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Reverend Miller. We appreciate it. Okay, members, I have a senator recognize Senator Heiss for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for a favorable report to the proposed committee substitute to House Bill 823, unfavorable as to the original bill, and would leave for staff to make technical and conforming changes.
Do I have a second? I have a second from Senator Bergen and Krovic. But any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. In the eyes of in the ears of the chair, the ayes have it. This bill is passed. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, thank you for being with us today. Audience, thank you for your participation in being here. This meeting is adjourned.